selling them.
Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this afternoon I'm delighted to be joined by Colin Watt and Kevin Graham for what has been quite an eventful week. The tagline's all about the statements. We'll get on to that. They keep to be bouncing back and forth between the police, the Green Brigade, the boys and the Celtic Football Club themselves. We'll be talking about some of the international endeavours as well. And it's a tale, gents. It's the tale of two Lennons. We're going to start off with Neil Lennon. Neil Lennon has been revealed today. There was actually rumblings in and around the wilds of Fife yesterday, gents, that Neil Lennon was going to be announced as a Dunfermline manager. The jungle drums, I could hear them. I was getting texts left, right and centre as if I've gotten in.
Was it like Jumanji?
It was a bit like Jumanji, aye. Go and check that out for anybody who might have missed that one. So, Neil Lennon, the reason I bring it up, I was having a look at this today, right? And give me a guess. How many ex-Celts do you think have managed Dunfermline? Have a think about that, right? How many ex-Celts have managed Dunfermline Athletic Football Club?
I'll go 8.
Right, that's a good guess. You're not right, but it is a good guess, Colin. What about yourself, Kev?
6.
6, right. Colin, you know if we had that game where it's higher or lower and you get closest, you're the closest, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure who that was. Was that Bruce Forsyth? I'm not sure. Anyway, there's actually 9, but a lot of people might have given you 8, Colin, because one of them only played as a guest on one occasion for Celtic. So I think you might get that one.
Definitely 8 then. The answer's 8.
I'll run through them. You can decide. Right, Neil Lennon will be the 10th. Neil Lennon will be the 10th ex-Celtic player.
9.
Or 9th. Or 9th to manage Dunfermline. I'm going to have to go right back to the 1930s. David Taylor, from 1936 to 1938, he played as a guest for Celtic in 1919. That's the one you might want to put a wee asterisk next to.
Well, if you can count half titles, if you can count shared titles, then we can count anything.
World War I titles, shared titles with Dumbarton. The next one was Peter Wilson, who managed between 38 and 39 at the Pars. Then it was the only, Jock Stein, who managed at Dunfermline from 1951 to, that's not right, he played for Celtic between 51 and 57. Right, Pat Stanton. Could you remember Pat Stanton? Pat Stanton was the manager at Dunfermline from 1980 to 1982. Davy Hay. Davy Hay, you might have forgotten about Davy. Davy Hay was the manager. Then John Potter was a manager who had played with Celtic. Peter Grant, John Yogi Hughes, and believe it or not, the departed Michael Tidster started off at Celtic as well. So Neil Lennon will be the 10th ex-Celt to manage Dunfermline. Just a very quick one, because he played a massive part in the history of this football club. Kev, what's your thoughts on that? Is that a good move for Lenny?
I don't. We'll see how it works out. I mean, I think one of the rumours is the Americans that owned Dunfermline signed 10 players in the January window, and Michael Tisdale only wanted one of them. So they went doing a data-driven scouting system. So I don't know how chaotic Dunfermline actually is. Look, Lennon is a firefighter. If you want to get somebody to go in there and keep you up in a division, he's the man. He's the man. So I'm surprised that somebody like St Johnstone and that have never came for him when they've been in that, because they've now swiped right on Tinder on relegation. And I think if they would have brought in Lennon instead of Vico Valacari, then they might have had a chance of staying up. So fair play to Dunfermline for taking it'll be interesting to see the length of his contract.
Kev, you're going to have to explain this Tinder thing to me. I'm 47-year-old, mate. I have no idea what swiping left and swiping right is. So you're going to have to, I don't know how you know that. I genuinely don't know, and neither does your wife. She doesn't know how you know that. But anyway, I get your point. Dunfermline obviously had the German investment, which led to that big friendly match with St. Pauli. You'll remember a couple of seasons ago, I think it was. Actually, the fans were not big supporters of these guys in the end, and they've moved on, and they've got new investment that's come in. But you're right, there was a real focus on the data-driven recruitment, Kev. And that's what's happened, and there's a group of players there. Obviously, there's no transfer window, Colin. He's going to have to work with the players he's got. Can he keep them up? Because tipping into the third tier of Scottish football again would be disastrous for the players.
Yeah, it would. In terms of the appointment, it's probably a good appointment for Dunfermline. You're getting a man that's experienced in the Championship. Obviously, did well with Hibs. It's probably where Neil Lennon's managerial career is at just now. His last few appointments have been a complete disaster for him. And you're not just going to walk into half-decent jobs on the back of some results 7-8 years ago. It's just not the way football is anymore, as you were saying, Kev. They're now looking at this sort of data analysed approach. I don't see how Neil Lennon fits into that, but maybe he's changed a lot since the last time he was in Scottish football, because it definitely wasn't the route that he was going down when he was at Celtic the last time. So it'll be interesting to see. In terms of relegation for Dunfermline, I think it'll be a close one. I think Airdrie have bounced back really well at the start of the second half of this season. I think Rhys McCabe's men have kind of gone this run where they win 2 or 3, they'll maybe lose 1, then they'll get a draw, and then they'll go on another wee run. And I think there's only 6 points between them with, was it 7 games to go, Paul? So, and I think they've still got to play each other as well, so that'll be a 6-pointer for sure. And selfishly, I kind of hope Airdrie stay up because my wee cousin plays for them. But yeah, so down for the Pars.
Well, the thing is, Kev and Colin, you both kind of touched on it. There's been a few managerial positions that Neil Lennon has held since leaving Celtic. Obviously, he spent some time in Cyprus, Monia Nicosia. He won a cup. He basically won the Cypriot Cup over there, and you'll remember he ended up at Old Trafford playing in the Europa League. I think he did all right, but they emptied him, and then he ends up taking a bit of a strange job over in Romania, which didn't last very long. A wee bit longer, it's got to be said, than the Pars manager, who Shabs tells us was called Tidser, lads. Not Tidsder.
Interesting fact on
Tidsder. Or Tizer. I don't know. Did I call him Tidster? Apologies, Shabs.
Probably me. It's probably me. It's
Tidser. Tidser. There you go.
Interesting fact on Michael Tidser, though, is he's the last player that Morton got a transfer fee for when he went to Rotherham. I think it was 150 grand. That's the last player.
How long ago was that?
Oh,
within the last 10 years.
10 years ago, probably. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, because he's only 35 now. So we've touched on that. Good move, bad move. What would you say, guys? Get off the fence. Good or bad?
If he wants to get back into coaching, it's a good move for him. It's the only move for him. It's the only move that's been presented. As I say, I'll be really interested to see the length of the contract.
Yeah, I think he's got to rebuild his career. I mean, you look at, as you were just talking about that spell in Romania, and I think when you see Neil Lennon in the press, it's normally not a good thing. So he needs something to rebuild his career. And if that's at Dunfermline, then maybe the next step is back into the Scottish Premier League. But you've got to put the building blocks in to get back there, I think.
What I would say is that Dunfermline have ended the careers of 4 of the guys that I spoke about earlier. Peter Grant, John Hughes, Davy Hay and Pat Stanton. Their managerial careers ended on the back of their times at Dunfermline. So it is a bit of a poison chalice. They've not been in the top division since administration struck back in 2012. So to get them out of the Championship would be huge. Kev, you're talking about length of contract. He'd need 3 to 5 years to do that. That's what you would need. Whether or not that's been presented, I don't know. Is it a case of short-termism? Keep them up? I don't know.
That's what I'm maybe thinking, No, I'm maybe thinking that. I'm going, if it's like a 6-month contract, then we review it in the summer, So I don't know if it'll be a long-term deal or that. That's what I'm thinking. I think he's just going in there to make sure they stay in the Championship, then they're going to take it for there.
I would ask. Sorry, on you go, Colin.
I was going to say, it'd be silly for them to offer him any more than till the end of the season. Because what happens if they do go down?
I know.
That it is, as Kevin says, it's just to the end of the season, and if he keeps them up and provides a great escape, then you review it.
Absolutely, Colin. I think in the press conference, my first question would be, did you agree with Chris Sutton when he said Dunfermline lay down to give Rangers the Championship back in the day? That would be a good starting point. He wouldn't dislike me any more than he already does. The other thing in relation to Dunfermline is I spoke to Jackie Mack probably about a year ago. Now, it was a year ago. It was last January. We went over and did a thing in Belfast. We had a right good chat about Dunfermline. He reckons that they are potentially one of the sleeping giants of Scottish football when you look at the infrastructure there, the support base. I mean, they're still getting 4,500 at the minute. having had a really, really poor season. So, yeah, I tend to agree with that with Jackie. The other Lennon, of course, Colin, I'm going to throw this one to you. John Hartson reckons that Lennon Miller would walk straight into Celtic's team. Would he?
I think it would be a close run one. I think he's got the ability to definitely step into that role. All comes down to who's actually in the squad at that point. He's saying he'd walk into the team right now because after Sunday's performance, absolutely he would. But in terms of the overall ability of the squad, he's probably, if he was to join right now, our fourth choice midfielder.
Well, you're talking about Sunday there, and there's been massive reaction to that, Colin. Some knee-jerk reaction. Some of the stuff I've heard in relation to players like CCV and Johnston, who are part of the thumbnail today, because obviously there are two stories running. The first one is interest in CCV. The second one is in relation to Jesse Marsh. Was he not linked to the Celtic job back in the day? When Ange got it. He is obviously now Johnston's manager at an international level, and he's basically telling him, it's a bit easy for you in Scottish football. And AJ's saying, well, I'm not taking my Scottish Doug away somewhere else, which I thought was tremendous. And that's just typical AJ. So there's been some knee-jerk and all the rest of it. But Lennon Miller, he's definitely one of the names that's been there or thereabouts, Kev, for some time now. And I'm surprised he's still at Miller. I thought someone would have pulled the trigger on this move already. And there's only one team in Scotland would pay the money for him, which is Celtic. I'm not convinced he wants to stay in Scottish football. What's your take on
it? I must admit, I'm going to be truthful here. I couldn't answer the question whether he was getting in the Celtic midfield or not. Mainly because I haven't seen enough of him. He had a decent first half against Celtic, a game earlier on this season at Fir Park when he hit the post, I think. Mm-hmm. Any other time, I can't say when I've watched Celtic against Motherwell that he stood out for me. I think the move didn't happen in January because he got injured because of that. So I do not actually know if he would walk into that Celtic midfield at this precise moment in time. I'm going to say no. I'm not going to say no. It depends on how we see him developing in the summer if we are interested. But what I've heard, that he doesn't want to stay in Scotland. He looks at guys like Lewis Ferguson and other players that went abroad and that, and other teams are now looking at the Scottish young talent because of the relative success that they've had. So what I've been told, that he would more than likely he'll move from Scotland.
Well, I was going to mention that. We're going to get into some of the international games in relation to the Celtic players who are involved in it. And that's a great point, Kev. The type of player that Lewis Ferguson is, he moves away, he's in and about the Scotland squad. I think that, for me, the strongest Celtic midfield at the moment, if we're playing with a three, which we've been playing with all season, is the one that we've been playing most of the season. It's Callum McGregor, Hatate and Engels. And I think the question is, Colin, does he get in there? Does he get into that midfield three?
No, he probably doesn't. That's what I'm saying. I think if you go with that being the strongest three, then he's probably the fourth choice. It'd be between him and Bernardo for fourth choice. Mm-hmm. The thing we've got to look at again, and I've probably harped on about this quite a few times since I've come back, is Callum McGregor's not getting any younger. And we waited far too long to pull the trigger when it came to Scott Brown, just because he was a legend at the club. I mean, he still is a legend at the club. I'm not saying that in a past tense as if he's not here, but we waited far too long to pull that trigger, and we saw the decline in his last season. And you don't want that to happen to someone like McGregor, who can be influential in bigger games. We're looking at Kieran Tierney coming back to the club in the summer, and all the talk is he'll not last the season. He can't play 50-odd games, so we need a second left-back. In that role that Callum McGregor plays, realistically, you should not be playing 50 to 60 games a season with the amount of running that you've got to put in the way that Celtic play football. So you do need a second option in every single position. And for me, Lennon Miller is the best defensive midfielder outside the top two in Scotland. And for that reason, we should be looking at players like that.
We should always be looking at them, Colin. I agree with you, mate. There was a period of time, and I'm not bringing it up because we missed out on him, but McGinn, it was screaming out to sign that player. And I've told the story when I watched him up against Stefan Johansson. McGinn was 17-year-old, played for St Mirren at Celtic Park. I think we won the game 1-0. Johansson might have scored, actually. And McGinn was the best player in the park. So I think you've always got to look at the top Scottish talent that's right on your doorstep, Colin, and sometimes get them before it gets to that point where they've got these other offers, right? Loads of other players to discuss, and we'll link it into their international endeavours this week. Because it is an international week and we've only had one game to play, but there's been loads to chat about now. David Boyle, I'm going to read this out verbatim, David. I didn't bring it up. Rocco Vata. There you go. There's the Klaxon guys. Rocco Vata, the Rocco Vata Klaxon, made his senior debut for Ireland last night. But Paul John, you're not allowed to mention it. Yeah, I've been banned from mentioning Rocco Vata. He made his senior debut. Brilliant. Came on in the 81st minute, got a booking, and he got his international bow. When you look at that Ireland team, Mikey Johnson started, and Adam Idah was on the bench, but he was an unused sub. So well done to Rocco. Really chuffed for the kid. But let's focus on that. Sorry, on you go, Kev.
Some might say that Adam Idah was an unused sub on Sunday as well.
Well, Kev, yeah, you're digging him in the ribs. We're talking about Adam Idah. That's the first international Celt. Sorry, mate.
I couldn't resist it. That was an open goal there. That was an open goal.
You look like you're swinging on one of the green barriers in the Rangers end of the day, Kev. And if you need to nip away, you'll just be going away for a macaroon bar or some Wrigley's juicy fruit, because they were the same. Adam Idah, let's have a wee chat about him. I'll come to you first, Colin, right? So in terms of the first talking point, is it a good move for Neil Lennon? I would say yes, but it's a better move for Dunfermline. And I think that's kind of what Kev was saying as well. And obviously, if he keeps him up, absolutely tremendous. Gets himself back in the short window. There's also that interesting dynamic between him and Bruni. If Aaron Dunfermline yet to play, probably, right? They'll probably play between now and the end of the season.
Some folk in the comments saying if he gets the job, his first game will be against Scotland.
Oh, wow. Brilliant. Excellent. That's what you like to see. Screen it live. Let's tune in. Right, so Adam Idah, as you say, Kev, wasn't great at the weekend, but I think when you look at the change that was made at half-time, at 2-0 down, and we pull it back to 2 each, Rodgers probably looks at that, Colin, and says that was the right change. Yeah,
Nicholas Kuhn had a really poor first half. To be perfectly honest, it could have been a number of the players that were taken off at half-time. There wasn't really one standout individual that you said was playing extremely well. Apart from, you give credit to Mike Nawrocki for coming in, and considering he came out the blue, I thought his performance was pretty decent. But Idah coming in wasn't overly effective, though probably created a bit more space for Maeda as he got the goal, and then pushing Maeda wide maybe created a bit more in terms of chances. But Idah, he's not the Idah that we saw of the last 6 months last season, where he was influential, he was coming on, he was scoring goals. And that performance away at Kilmarnock, the day that we won the league, I think it was it 5-0 or something, when he was running riot. He was the best player on that park that day. He was pulling the defenders left, right. That's all you're asking for Idah to be playing in that role. See the amount of times you've seen players like Olasanya for St Mirren, or players of that ilk causing trouble for defenders, especially against Rangers, just using their physicality and putting themselves about there. We didn't do that, and Idah didn't do that. At times, it felt like he was sort of jogging about the park. He wasn't really closing down the way that Maeda was. And I don't know if it's a confidence thing with him just now, but he's shown what he can do in the last 6 months of last season. So he needs to try and get back to that level. Otherwise, I don't think he'll be at the club at the start of next season.
The big thing for me, Colin, absolutely you go back to what he did last season, because he earned his move. I wanted him to sign Jim Moore, who's always looking at the balance sheets. He wanted to spend the $9 million to bring him in at the football club. And he's had a patch, I think, this season when he has had good form, right? And I think he has performed particularly well in the Champions League. I think when you look at his Champions League performances, even Bayern Munich, he was involved in the goal that was scored over there. But all too often, he's cut an isolated figure. And as you say, it's like everything's in slow motion and he's wading in treacle and all that. Not as dynamic as you need to see. Some of these big guys that you've mentioned here, Colin, who seem to cause us trouble with their physicality, aren't a patch on Adam Idah. But Adam Idah needs to have that approach to the game, I think, a little bit more. It can't just be, see if you're scoring goals, Adam, great, every touch is a good one and all that. You've got to be a goal-scoring striker for Celtic every week.
I do wonder though, Paul, I don't know if he's got that ability, and I know he's done it for Ireland, but I don't know if he's got that ability for us to play in that lone striker role. some of the best play that we saw of Adam Idah at points was when he was playing off a Kyogo. At times, we're sort of chasing a goal, and he was the one that was playing the 9, and Kyogo was playing the 10, and they were playing off each other, and there was a lot of really good link-up play. But he as you say, he cuts an isolated figure in the middle of the park, and at times, there's nobody within 10 yards of him. So he's not got that pass, he can't make that move, he can't get in behind. And when you look at the difference when Maedah's through the middle, with Sunday being the exception, he's the one that gets in behind, he uses his pace really, really well, and can cause a lot of trouble for defenders. So if he's not able to do that, you want him to throw himself about the way that Olasanya does and then hold the ball up for the players to come in off him. But he's not doing that either. So I don't know how you get the best out of Adam Idah just now, but for me, I'm not sure he's cut out to be a sort of lone striker for us.
The interesting thing for me, Kev, is that Kyogo was obviously the first choice striker, and even last season, when he was fit, Brendan Rodgers played him. This season, when he's left, it was all eyes on Adam, wasn't it? It was like, all right, Adam Idah's now the number one striker. In fact, he's our only striker. Obviously, Johnny Kenny is back up and he was on the bench at the weekend. Maeda, we know, can be transformed into a striker, 28 goals this season. But since that's happened, Idah's not claimed that jersey, Kev. Why do you think it is?
Basically because he hasn't been good enough.
Is he good? No, is he good enough then? He's not been. I agree with you. He's not been since Kyogo left. Is he good enough? Colin says there he wouldn't be surprised if he left in the summer. That would be a bit of a shock. But if you were to be offered your money back, would you take it?
I think the club would take the money, but Brendan wouldn't, because Brendan would need to actually prove right. Aye. So, look, any time that we've struggled against this mid-press and the man mark in the middle of the park, we've had no outball whatsoever. We've had no, folks say hit it long. Well, who are you hitting it long to? The ball's just coming straight back to us, especially on Sunday there against a team that had no interest in playing football. They basically won that game with a long ball. I think the club would take anything north of 5 million for Idah in the summer and move on, but Brendan will not. So he is here until Rodgers admits it's a mistake. I still think we will sign another striker in the summer, and that's going to cost us quite a bit of money, because when you look at it previously, even Maeda, and Idah did look like a Rodgers type striker, but he hasn't kicked on at all. When you look at it previously, we had Dembele, we had Odsonne Edouard as well, who you could fire that long ball, who could hold the ball up, who could go over the top if we did go long in that. We haven't got that. Even Maeda hasn't got that. So I think we will be looking at another more Rodgers style centre forward in the summer. No, I can't see Idah leaving, just basically because Rodgers will be stubborn. I think we've kind of got into, if you look at Rodgers' previously situation with Adam Idah, I think we've got to a Benteke situation in Liverpool where everybody else looked at it and says that's never going to work. And look, Idah never had a pre-season. He did not have a pre-season, so I'm willing to give him a pre-season. We'll have a look at the guys who are now really bossing us in the middle of the park. I need to go 2 minutes. Colin, can you take over?
He's a way to get the macaroon bars. That's fine.
See, on that, Paul, there's a player, he's literally running in there. There's a player that I was speaking about a couple of years ago that's made the move to the English Premier League, who I think, if his side were to go down, which it looks extremely likely, would be a great move in the ilk of an Olasanya, and that's Paul Onuachu, who's playing for Southampton just now. He was the top goal scorer in Belgium at the time when we spoke about him. He's a big physical presence. Southampton obviously are going down. He's not had the most amount of game time down there, but I think if you moved him up here, would he create more than what someone like Adam Idah would create for us? I think absolutely. I think he gives a far better option. Idah, for me, I still think he needs somebody to play off of, and as Kev's saying, if a team's playing that low block and he's the outball, it just doesn't work for us just now. And looking at that performance again on Sunday, there was a couple of times where we got a free kick or a goal kick just towards the end of the first half. and Schmeichel's determined it's going long. So when it's going long, at that point, he does not on the park. So you've got Maeda, you've got Kunin, you've got Jota. Not one of them you're really thinking is going to win a ball more than 30-40% of the time. But instead of that option, there was the right back or the left back who, instead of just staying wide and giving Schmeichel an easy out ball, decided, oh, well, everybody's going that side of the park, so I'll just trundle over here as well. And just having that intelligence to give us another option, instead of, as you're saying, playing it long to players that are, if you were to put money on it, they're not going to win 50% of the time. So we have to be smarter with things like that. So if, as Kevin's saying, if we're struggling with a low block, that should be something we're working on. Because that's the last 3 games now. We've conceded nine goals to them. They've played the exact same style of football those 3 times, and Rodgers hasn't found a way to beat it.
We've also had problems against, and I keep saying the Easter Road game, but actually if you watch the Hibs game back at Celtic Park, they could have been 3-0 up against us if it wasn't for a combination of good saves by Schmeichel and poor finishing by Hibs. Dundee away, they give us loads of problems by playing the same way, bullying us, the vulture press, as it's now been named, and St Mirren recently as well. You know, they could have had if they had got that penalty as well, Colin, and we discussed it at the time, then you're looking at a completely different outcome. So I think the warning signs have been there, and the biggest disappointment is that we've not managed to deal with them, either in match, Colin, or post-match after any of these games I've just mentioned. I'm going to disagree slightly on the Idah thing. I'm going to say this, and it's not me being stubborn. I think we've seen enough in his loan spell and for periods during his permanent spell that would suggest that he has got what we need in a striker. But I'm going to say a couple of things. The first one is he wasn't party to a full pre-season at Celtic, absolutely, and it does affect you. He was unsettled. Remember, he kind of forced the move, missed the flight, all that stuff. Yeah. Colin. It comes to Celtic, and he's playing second fiddle to Kyogo for the best part of the season, right up until January. It's been a bit of a stop-start season for him. I think about a month or 2 ago, I says there's going to be big moments for Idah, and he's had a few this season. I mean, he's had a few big moments this season. I know he didn't score against Young Boys, but his contribution to that goal was huge. His contribution to the Bayern Munich goal away from home can't be understated. His contribution down at Villa Park, you know, we can't underestimate this. He also, I felt, played really, really well against Atalanta away. So I think we've seen enough, but for some reason at this moment in time, Colin, he's absolutely off it. And it's all about Brendan Rodgers trying to bring him back to the Adam Idah we know. I would prefer it if we kept him and bought one of these strikers that we are apparently interested in. And there's going to be a short list of half a dozen strikers that we're interested in. But I would want to keep Adam Idah.
Yeah, well, realistically, you are running with just Idah as your striker. Because as much as Maeda's played in that role, Rodgers has alluded to the fact that we miss something when Maeda's not playing out in the wing. And obviously we've got Jota and Kuhn. But then the drop-off from there is quite large right now. That, like, okay, Yang's come onto a game in the last couple of weeks. But apart from that, you get James Forrest, who's nursing a very bad injury by the sounds of it, because he's been out for the best part of 3 months now, although he's back in training. But then apart from that, who else is there? When you look at the bench on Sunday, the only other option to bring on for the wide areas, if you didn't bring Idah on to move Maeda wide, was young Jude Bonner. And it's a big occasion to throw somebody into, and we've seen Rodgers isn't just somebody that's going to give young players minutes just for the sake of it. They've got to sort of integrate themselves into the team. And as much as he was on the bench on Sunday, unless we were 3 or 4-0 up, there was no chance that you ever thought you were going to see someone like him coming onto the park. So we do need to invest in the wide areas. And I know that we were linked with the boy from Antwerp, was it Balakashwa? That was obviously injured during the summer, and they re-looked at that again in January, and again he got injured. So that's maybe a concern there as well. But in the striking department, it is just Idah. And Rodgers already spoke about the fact that he wants to run with 3 strikers. So whether it be Idah, Maeda and another, or Idah and 2 others in the summer, and one being a young player that he thinks he can develop, it'll be interesting to see what approach he takes. But for me, if Idah wants to get to be the number 1 striker, and I know what you're saying there, he came in and he was behind Kyogo and that, he's got to have the mentality to be able to do that. And I'm not sure he's shown that just yet. because you're not just going to walk into a club like Celtic coming from Norwich, where you weren't even a starter at Norwich, and say, I'm the number one striker ahead of a guy who had scored umpteen goals for Celtic, a record of like winning a goal every 2 games. You're not just going to walk into a team because we've paid £9 million for you. You've got to show that mentality that you can do it, you can get to that level. And for me, Idah has only shown that in glimpses, and I'm not sure a full pre-season or anything like that can improve it, but I'd love to be proved wrong.
Would the real Idah please stand up? I think that's what we're saying. My ideal scenario next season, nothing against the boy. I think Johnny Kenny needs to move. I think it's time for him to go. He's had 5 appearances at Celtic. Some might say that's not enough. He needs a run of games, etc., etc. I think that role as your kind of third choice striker, and I believe the same with the goalkeeper, and I believe the same with some of the other positions, should be an emerging talent. It should be an emerging talent. We mentioned, and by the way, David Boyle's fault, we mentioned Rocco Vata earlier on, and Brendan Rodgers did say that he was in his plans to be a third striker at Celtic. Daniel Cummins then emerges this season. Maybe he was in the plans, but obviously he's signed a pre-contract with West Ham. So I would actually say Johnny Kenny moves on, Idah stays, we buy another top-class striker. We've seen all the names that we've been linked with, and Maeda. Maeda's also an option.
As long as you can Maeda, though, that's going to be the struggle as well.
Well, you know, we'll get on to the subject of keeping what you've got together and enhancing it, Colin, rather than, you know, always chasing your tail and buying 5 players when actually you only needed 4 because you've sold somebody. Talking international football, Kev, you're back. You've got your macaroon bar. Is your mic on, mate? I don't think it is.
It's on now. What I was actually saying is there's some players that we saw playing against us on Sunday, like your Raskans, your Diamandis and that, who folk are saying they're now world beaters. And this is how we shouldn't write anybody off. Yep. And I'm quite willing to give Idah pre-season and a Brendan Rodgers, a full pre-season under Brendan Rodgers, to then make a decision on him. Because it can help. I think you actually see it with Raskin and Diamandi that they're far better in our Clermont system, and it suits them because they haven't got much football ability, but it suits the way that they actually play. So I'm willing to give them the pre-season, and I think Rodgers will be willing to give them the pre-season. I mean, I think you can you say for certain that Kenny hasn't got a future here? Probably because he never brought him on. Then again, it's quite difficult to bring him on because then you're going to take off. Who are you taking off? You're taking off my Idah, or you're taking off Idah and go, big man, you've had a mare, I'm taking you off.
I think the other question is that we've talked about lack of options. There's only a lack of options if you stick to the same formation.
Yes, and he did stick to the same formation. And even when you're looking at it, there were some guys having absolute howlers. And the one that you probably would have said, well, we can maybe replace would have been AJ, right? It would have been AJ. And there's a parallel universe somewhere where AJ's been taken off and that third goal doesn't happen. And Anthony Ralston's booted Cherny into next week. Because I would have brought on the bricky and just tell him, go and burn somebody.
Well, this is
somebody and try to get us back into it. But that's hindsight.
No, well, is it hindsight though, Kev? Is it? Because I know he played well last night. He's getting loads of plaudits today. But watching the game, it was obvious to anybody watching that game that Johnson was having a howler. And I keep saying this, I've said it all week. He gave the ball away 5 times in the first half. That is very uncharacteristic of Alistair Johnston. For me, the best defender on the park was Mike Nawrocki. I agree with you, Colin. But he's the worst passer of the ball at the back, and he's the slowest. So if you're going to make a change, right, I would probably be looking at your Ralston or Taylor as an inverted. And to flood the midfield rather. I'd go 3 at the back at that point, Kev, but we seem so reluctant to change the shape.
Nawrocki was the only one of the back 5 that didn't even have a howler. So that's why he's been put up on a pedestal. But
no, I disagree, mate. Disagree. Honestly, I rewatched his performance. He did not give the possession away. He won back possession when his teammates were giving it away. And he won every aerial duel. Every aerial duel, he won it.
But then you say yesterday that Cameron Carter-Vickers never lost a ball in the first half as well. But he never played a ball at like two loss a ball. He never played a dangerous pass. We just went round in that horseshoe of doom. Then we got then we got pressed and we couldn't get out.
Kev, we never really do that though. That's been one of the criticisms of Carter Vickers, Trusty, Scales. Pick any two of the three that's playing in that formation this season. That is not the style of football that Rodgers is looking for. I don't know if you've had the chance to listen to Kasper Schmeichel on the overlap.
Yeah,
he was speaking about that and the style.
I lasted 11 minutes and couldn't stand Jamie Carragher. So
that's easy done that.
Who do you prefer, Carragher or Neville? Who do you prefer?
None of them. I would fire basically.
Get off the fence. Get off that green barrier, Kev. You've got to choose one of them.
Neville, because he's got a better taste in music.
Colin, who do you prefer?
Carragher, because he's a Scouser. But anyways, the
xenophobic.
That interview, what Kasper was saying in that, you put me off here, was the way that their style of football is it comes to the centre half, and then the centre half's responsibility is to make the easy pass to get out. It's not to play a dangerous pass. And you see that now when you look back at Celtic's performances, is that the people that probably have the most touches of the ball over the whole 90 minutes is your two centre halves. Yeah. Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to draw in the players. And you could see that on Sunday to an extent as well. The problem is you need the options left and right for that to happen. For a lot of the time this season, it's been Greg Taylor who's wanted to shift inside, and then it leaves a big gap to Idah, and it's not worked. When Johnson's playing well, it does work. But then you've had the issues of having two left-footed centre-halves, you've had a right-footed and a left-footed. It's just not worked for whatever reason. But that's the style of football, and you can see that's what Rodgers has been trying to do. The problem is getting the players into that position to do that. And as you say, when Johnson's having a poor game, it takes away the right-hand side of the park. If Taylor or Slip's having a bad game, it takes away the left-hand side of the park, and we just can't get out. So we do probably need to have a plan B. But we're not going to get that. It's not going to be Carter Vickers going the way that Virgil van Dijk would and driving forward, or Idah would and driving forward. They're going to get to a certain point, and then it's an easy 5-yard pass.
That's what we need.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Kevin. I'm just saying
we've got a system that doesn't suit the players that are there. And it's been proven when we've came up against decent Europa League level sides in Bruges and Zagreb and Young Boys and even in Rangers, that if they man mark us out the game, we've got nothing. We've got nothing. But then we can come back into the game once we go into a double pivot, which we've done in the second half. And why we do not start with that double pivot, I do not know. And these games against better teams. I do not understand that, because it just gives you that two options. When they're pressing, it gives you that two options.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, but Kev, it's again what you've just said. We don't have the players that can do that 100% of the time. If you started that game with Engels and Callum McGregor on Sunday, you could easily play that double pivot, because both of them like to come down, come back to the defensive side of the park, pick up the ball and take it forward. And I thought Engels did that really well in the second half. I know he's getting a lot of stick, but I thought he was really good in that second half. The problem then goes is when you play that double pivot, you need the players that are further up the park to maybe drop that wee bit back as well, so that they can take the ball and you can go forward as a team. Too many times we've seen that where we've played the double pivot and there's like a 10-15 yard gap, and it's like, well, how do we get and bridge that gap between the midfield and the forward line? And we've not been able to do that either. So you need that sort of box-to-box midfielder that's playing in there. So if McGregor was playing alongside Engels, it probably works really well. But alongside Hatate or McCowan, it's not quite the same.
I'm going to throw in Bernardo as well, Colin.
Yeah, Bernardo obviously has been injured.
Yeah, he's a seldom seen kid this season, and he's a guy that I think his contribution last season was brilliant. Defensively, in attack, I remember when he signed permanently, and he was asked about what's your best position, because I do actually see him more of a defensive player. I know he's had his moments going forward, but he's a good ball carrier. Remember his Scottish Cup final contribution. He's good at progressing that ball. What I was going to say, Kev, about Carter Vickers, although he wasn't giving away possession cheaply, he was part of two of the goals. And on both occasions, he should have done better, right? So he needs to win the header for the big boot up the park for the winner. But the second goal, he doesn't track Diamonde. He's in no man's land, and that's happened a few times this season. He's absolutely nowhere.
That's a game, but that's probably the fact that he's got Naroki alongside him. And there's a whole. He's never really played with Narovsky or Naroki or whatever his name is. And so there's a Mike. So there's a bit of that there, and there's a bit of confusion there. What I would actually say, I mean, Carter Vickers didn't have a good game. I didn't get his excuse. I lost it in the air. Did you? I mean, that was coming straight at you. Dessers wasn't doing much round about you. You should have been able to deal with that, mate.
Totally.
Alistair Johnston slit him. It's poor. I'm trying to remember what would Cameron Carter Vickers for Celtic Rangers game be? Because this is the first time I can really remember him having a howler. Did he play at the 1-0 defeat at Ibrox under?
And just first season.
No, his first one would have been the 3-0 victory at Celtic Park.
Yeah, he didn't play in the 1-0 game because we had he came in the last day of the window, didn't he?
What I would say about Big Sloop, I've seen guys having a nightmare on their Celtic Rangers debut before. Alan Thompson being one of them. Mm-hmm. We got beat 5-1 at Ibrox, and Thompson had an absolute nightmare. That can happen in these games. That can happen in these games to guys. So I'm not too worried about him at all. But have we got a problem with Cameron Carter Vickers? No, I don't think we have. I do think we need a ball carrying centre half. I really do. I think Tierney could be that. Tierney could be the man that'd be able to break that high press because he can actually carry the ball.
He can.
He can actually carry the ball. But I still think that we need, when we come up against better sides, I do think that we actually need better midfield players.
I'm just throwing this out here, Kev. Would you take Idah back? Somebody mentioned Idah before. Would you? By the way, it would cost you a few quid. He's still under contract to 2028, but he's only played like 17, 18 games this season for Brentford. Is he a player that you would have back?
He's the type of player that we need.
I loved him. I loved him. Remember that conversation we had? And I said to you, this is our next £10 million sale, remember? And he was quite young at the time. And I've watched his career with interest. If it hadn't been for COVID, AC Milan were interested in him. You remember the teams that were interested in our players. Sampdoria were interested in Ryan Christie. Arsenal were interested in Edouard. And then there was that whole knock-on effect of COVID. Nobody was spending money. We come out at the end of that. We probably lost quite a few quid on those three players as a result of that. But Chris Idah, for me, 26 years of age. Colin, would you have him back? We seem to be bringing the old gang back. A wee bit like today, actually, with Colin and Kev back on the show. Would you have him?
I mean, yes, but it is extremely lazy recruitment, isn't it? Like, oh, he's been here before, so he was good. Let's do it. There's very few players that go away and come back a better player or come back the player that they even were when they were at Celtic. Idah has had a decent spell at Brentford. He's obviously played a lot for his country as well. As Kev says, he is that ball carrying defender, purely because I think he's more of a defensive midfielder than a centre half, and I think at times you saw that. But he would probably suit the Brendan Rodgers style of football, where the centre half's got on the ball quite a lot. But again, I don't even know what footed he is. Does he suit to play alongside Carter Vickers? Is he a Carter Vickers replacement? I can't remember too much about the way that he would fit into that team. But the problem, I think, Kev, with Carter Vickers isn't necessarily Carter Vickers. Apart from his injuries, it's who plays alongside Carter Vickers.
Well,
at the moment, it's
Chris Idah can play right or left. I've just looked at his appearances up to now in his senior career, and he's played across the back. I know that right back was a position that he played as well. So yeah, he could adapt. Colin, I'll put it out there, and I want to hear your thoughts in the comments section about the big talking points today. The first one we opened up with Neil Lennon: will he be a success at Dunfermline? Is it a good move? Second one was Lennon Miller: would he get into Celtic's midfield right now? And the third one, of course, is Chris Idah. Would you sign him? I'd take him in a heartbeat.
Can I bring up this comment, Paul? Sorry. Alpha 0964, Idah wanted away down tools. Completely disagree with that. In the COVID season when we won the league, Christopher Idah is the only one that can look himself in the mirror and say, I did not down tools.
His performances, Kev, right? When you watch it, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. Because I remember game after game, I remember Colin I think it was the AC Milan game, Colin. You had enough. You'd had enough. You were like, I'm away for a walk. I'm not watching the game. Right? That's how difficult the COVID season was when we were covering every kick of the ball. It was like, dearie me. I remember at 70 minutes just about every game thinking, what are we going to talk about after this game? Another horrible performance. But one of the guys I didn't feel that down tools was Chris Idah. Now, listen, nobody likes the term, apparently, down tools. Neil Lennon said it himself. There's guys in that dressing room don't want to play for Celtic. They don't want to be here. Remember, after the Ferencváros game, Kev, we covered the game. Colin, you, me and Kevin Maguire. And he said it. And people started thinking Chris Idah was one of those guys. The season ends and he goes and he leaves, etc., etc. What if he did? What if he did want to leave? If he's the best, and again, Colin, yeah, I agree with you. That is kind of lazy. But if he's the best option, I would have him in a heartbeat. I would have Chris Idah in a heartbeat if he was the best option to bring back to the football club. Ollie Burke, I'm on the fence. Brendan McCarthy, hail, but he's still the most expensive Scottish footballer of all time. Hail, boys. I thought Tony Ralston had a great game for Scotland. Do you think Rodgers rates him as he will always do a job for us? We had this chat, Colin, after the game against Rangers because he didn't make an appearance, because there was an opportunity maybe to put in Ralston. I agree with Kev. He's the type of guy. He's hurting on the bench big time. He wants to get into that action and make a difference. We know that technically he's not the greatest footballer. We know that. I mean, I asked AI, is Tony Ralston the greatest footballer of all time? Kev's seen the response. You know the new AI
from 5 years ago, to be fair.
Yeah, the AI function that's on X now, right? I just typed into that, and it was shocked that I even asked the question. But Tony Ralston, for me, it was a strange outcome. I felt that he didn't get any minutes, Colin, because even for, you know, when you go 2-2, and you're looking, you're going, right, Turley and Bonner, I'm going to have to throw young guys into the mix here.
Yep.
Johnny Kenny, as Kev's already said, you've already made that tactical switch. Somebody else is going to be disappointed. Idah might even have to come back off because he seems reluctant to change the shape in it. But Johnston could have came off all day long. And Ralston is good at hitting that byline and cutting it back, and Idah can feed off that. Does it say anything, or am I looking too much into it in terms of Ralston's future at Celtic? Because I just always had him as a guy that would just be here forever.
I think he looks at himself now and he knows he's a squad player. And that's up to him to decide whether that's what he's happy with for his career or if he wants to go out and be the first choice at another team. It's obviously not affecting his international career because he's constantly in the squad, and obviously he played last night. And you could say that's down to injuries to Patterson and to, totally forgot, the Hickey, sorry. But apart from that, he is that sort of Mr. Reliable to an extent where he'll turn up 10 games a season and put in a shift. And as you say, I think he's probably one of the worst technically in the team, but in terms of giving 100% for the jersey and for the badge, you don't really get many others like him. You think back but to a lot of some of the good squads, not just at Celtic but across, like the teams that went on and won loads and loads of trophies, and even going back to as far as maybe like Alex Ferguson's time at Man United, and you look at the players that he kept there that were just good enough that if he needed them, they were reliable and you could rely on them and throw them in.
Brian McClare became that player for Ferguson for a few seasons. He was past his best, but he's a great squad player, Colin.
Yeah,
to bring in and close a game off.
You need that though. Like you're not going to have 18 or 19 first choice, I'm the best player in that position in your squad, because it's a nightmare to try and manage that, because everybody will want to play the 90 minutes. But having guys like Ralston that you can say, oh, well, Johnson's not having a great game, as Kev says, go on for 15 minutes, keep it tight, just put your heart on everything, dive in front of everything. He's that sort of player, and he's maybe the only one, with maybe the exception of James Forrest, that's left at the club that you'd say, if you needed him for 15 minutes to give absolutely everything for the badge, you would do it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Paul, on you go.
I'm just saying, what's your take? Is Ralston's position changed? The very fact that Brendan didn't find a way to introduce him to that game at the weekend, when sometimes that old-fashioned bite and dig and all that is what you actually require. You're going into the last, let's say, 20 minutes of the game, 2-2. They've had 120 minutes on the Thursday, just to give a new set of, a new energy, a new pair of legs on the park, and Ralston didn't get the nod. Does it change things for you in terms of his future?
No, it doesn't change anything for me, because I think Rodgers will regret not taking a chance with the other 3 subs, because look, when we equalised with 15 minutes to go, there was only one team that should have won that game, and it was us.
Mm-hmm.
They basically bring on Lawrence and again with 83 minutes or something like that. They use their 5 subs, and they go on to win the game. We're punt up the park. I think Rodgers will regret no gambling, but he doesn't gamble. He's not a gambling manager, and I don't think it says anything about Tony Ralston whatsoever. I really do think that say AJ had scored the equaliser with the last kick of the ball, Rodgers had went up, proves the right that I kept him on. I think he was maybe looking for. I think he maybe was looking for leaders, and when he was having a look round about that park, he's going, "I'm going to take off a big personality here, which is no playing well, and putting on a wild card." And why we would all do it, Rodgers won't. He very, very rarely does it. But then again, he done it with Kenny and Ross County, another game that we were struggling as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Rodgers. No, it doesn't say anything about Tony Ralston. Ralston will be here he'll be like James Forrest. He'll be here.
I hope you're right.
Who would you have made as the subs, Kev? Who would you have made as the subs? Because we still had 3 to make. Who would you have, if you were Rodgers in that position? What would your subs have been?
I'll tell you mine in a minute, Colin, right? But beforehand, there's the response. Is Tony Ralston the greatest footballer of all time? For some strange reason, AI thought, I can't remember Tony scoring against Rangers. Tony never scored against Rangers, did he?
No.
In 2021? I can't remember that. I remember a very important goal against Ross County. I think they've got that wrong. So if they can get that wrong, they can also get the answer wrong as well. Right, changes. I know the changes I would make, but the question was asked to yourself, Kev, so I'll let you go first.
I would have took off AJ and brought on Ralston as the BBC.
Ralston.
That's how they pronounce it. That's so
on the BBC when he's playing for Scotland. I would have took off Luke McCowan, who played every inch of our 5th choice midfielder. He actually played like a 7th choice midfielder. I would have took off Luke McCowan, and I would have thrown on Bonner. And I would have brought on Greg Taylor for Sloop.
Right, okay.
But then again, that's completely changing all the facets of the team, and Rodgers wouldn't have done that.
Well, you're right in what you say. Right?
Mainly because we were in control of that second half. He wouldn't have done it. If we had ended that game 2-each, Rodgers making 2 subs is right. The fact that we lost the last minute goal kind of changes it.
Just on that, Kev, are you putting Bonner wide and moving Idah through the middle if you make those subs?
That's too tactical for me. I'm just putting him on the park. I'm just putting him on the park.
Create chaos. Well, Colin.
Like one day, son.
Yeah, Colin, the question you asked, right, it's at 2 each. So Jota's already off the park.
On the park. Yeah, we still had 3 subs to make, yeah.
So that at that point, I think I disagreed with the Jota coming off. I mean, maybe his monitor was saying he had to come off. You know, let's remember he didn't play a lot of football for 18 months, and we're maybe taking it for granted that he's at peak condition. Maybe he's not. There was a run in the first half actually, him and Tavernier, and the other one. You know, when he ended up on the deck and somebody booted the ball against him, and we got the throw in.
Yep.
And he looked pretty slow, which was unusual, very unusual early on. And name drop of the day, I turned around to Bobby Petter and I asked him, I says, it's my imagination, is he looking a wee bit? He goes, he's definitely not peak condition yet. But he's obviously having to play, and as Kev says, we're a wee bit thin when it comes to options because of injuries. But at 2-2, your lineup has got Yang having replaced Jota and Idah having replaced Kuhn. And of course, Mader's playing in the wide position. I think what I would have done, Nawrocki for me, and I'm not changing my mind on this, was the best defender, but I'd have taken him off because he's the least likely to make that pass that we've been talking about earlier on, guys. He's the least likely of all those guys. Sloop can make that pass. And I would have kept him on, even though he wasn't playing particularly well. I'd have kept him on for that. I'd have gone to a 3 at the back. That's what I would have done. And I'd have actually brought on the experience rather than the rookies. I'd have brought in Taylor and Ralston. I'd have played them in midfield, brought off a midfielder, played 3 up top. That's what I would have done. Because again, it's chaos. It's the unknown. We've never done it. It was all a bit pedestrian, a bit conservative for me.
But from Brendan's point of view, he's going, we're 2 each.
It's working.
Looks like we're going to win this game,
Yes.
or at least we're not going to lose it. So he's not thinking that way.
It's interesting you say that, Kev, because that was sort of, I mean, I tried to miss as much of the post-match as possible, but it was one of the things that was actually part of Celtic's outlook as the interview that they'd done, is if you can't win these games, you can't lose them, was basically the way that Rodgers came out and looked at it. And I think at 2 each, maybe he was at that stage where he's like, right, well, if it's not going to happen for his day, let's just make sure we don't. But Rangers done that exact same thing as well. At one point, they were basically playing 7 across the back. They had a back 5 and they had 2 sitting in the pivot right in front, literally right in front. Because I'm behind that where I sit, and I could see there's the 5 and the 2, and then they just lumped it long, and they got lucky with it. They did. But for me, I think the changes are probably not too dissimilar from what you're saying. If you'd have brought Ralston on, if you bring Taylor on, it just gives that wee bit more the legs, because those players were definitely tired. It's the third sub that's the difficult one. You're meant to be bringing on.
That's your wild card, isn't it?
Yes, aye.
It's probably between Bonar, Kenny, and even Francis Turley going into because do you want to keep the same formation? If you're keeping the same formation, it's like for like with McCowan and Turley. If you're going to change it up, then you're putting on Bonar, and then Bonar goes wide, and then Maida comes through the middle. Or you take off McCowan. I think McCowan's the sub here. I know a lot of people in the comments don't think that Engels had a good game. I thought he was the best player in the midfield in the second half. But then you maybe throw on Kenny for McCowan and go to the 4-4-2 and keep Maida wide. So there is a lot of different options we could have went with, but Rodgers really just stuck with these are the guys that can go and win me the game, and it backfired for him.
When you look at what your manager does with the subs, there's never a change of formation. The only sub it makes sense is Ralston coming on for Alistair Johnson. That is the only sub which doesn't change anything to the shape. Even if he says we're at 2 each here, AJ's struggling here. You bring on Ralston and it doesn't change that much for the 10 minutes that's left. It doesn't.
I think he overlaps, whereas Johnston likes the underlap, if you know what I mean. You know, Ralston hits that byline, overlaps, and then you play that ball through him and he'll get the ball across. And that was something that I thought, you know what, that might have been a weapon. Kev, I actually thought McCowan was really poor in the first half, but he came onto a game in the second.
Yeah, he grew into it. The occasion got the better of him in the first half, but he definitely grew into the game.
Again, that's happened to better players than Luke McCowan.
Yeah, of course.
Again, he was probably the weakest. If you were to make that change at that point, he's the one that stands out to come off the park because he was the weakest of the three. Hatate had obviously scored. Engels, I know I've kind of harped on about it, but see if you go back and watch that game, see the amount of times that Engels was in space looking for a pass to try and get the ball forward, and it bypassed him. For whatever reason, it never went into him. It was frustrating to watch because he was the one with the energy in that midfield. And I encourage anybody that, I mean, it's a hard one to go back and watch, but just watch Engels in that second half. He's the one that's trying to be the spear point of the attacks. And the amount of times we bypassed him was criminal.
Watching the game back's an interesting one, Kevin. We're actually going to be watching the game back this weekend, but not that game, a different game. We're going to have a watch-along this weekend. Celtic TV have made available the full 90 minutes of the League Cup final 2000. Interesting enough, we win the Cup. I have never watched that game back. Am I spoiled? Did I take it for granted? I've just never watched that game back, right? So we win the game 2-0. It's Idah Recef and it's Tommy Johnston. Kenny Dalglish is a manager by this stage. John Barnes has been sacked. And it's a strange one. So we are actually going to do a watch-along. We're going to actually watch it because this is the win that started that era of domination from 2000 to 2025.
When you did the watch-along, Paul?
Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock.
If it was Sunday, I might have been able to join you.
Yeah.
We can't obviously show the footage, but whoever's watching it will be watching it on a different screen, and we've shared the link in the description of that video. It's on the YouTube. It's going to be interesting because you've got guys playing like Lubo Moravcik, a young Stan Petrov's playing. The captain's Tommy Boy, Jonathan Gould's in goal, Stuart Kerr's the sub-goalie. Berkovic is on the bench. The fans are singing the Henrik Larsson song because obviously he's recuperating from his broken leg. Other interesting, before we go to one final subject, other interesting international appearances came from Kasper Schmeichel, captained the Danish side to a 1-1 win over Portugal. 112 caps he's got now. You've got Maeda and Hatate sitting on the bench for Japan not getting on, and Kyogo not even getting on the bench. CCV benched for the USA as well. So Yang got a fleeting appearance for South Korea. Right, so if we look at the statements then, guys, very, very quickly, right, I make it 6. I think there's been 6 statements, right? So the Green Brigade made a statement about Celtic in relation to the banners pre-match. Then we had the Green Brigade making a statement about the police with the kettling issue. Then we had the boys making another statement against the police for the same. And then Celtic making a statement against the police and the behaviour at the stadium by some of the Rangers players. And then we had the police against the Green Brigade. The Federation guy came out and said, they're only doing their job and all this kind of stuff. They didn't want to be plastered all over the internet. And then the Green Brigade made another statement against the police in direct response to that one. Is there any others that I've missed, guys? I think there's 6. I think there's 6 statements at the moment this week, and we're only on day 5. Right. So, isn't it time to have a meeting, right? Right, where it's like a multi-agency meeting like you used to have at your work, where you've got somebody for the police, you've got somebody for the club, you've got somebody for the 2 ultra groups, and let's try and resolve this. Kevin, Graham, you were quite strong about it in your view on Monday when you were on the show. How are you feeling about it now? What needs to be done? We've said it all along. You've got to engage.
These sort of party meetings when everybody's there used to happen when I was involved in the fan groups. They used to happen before Celtic Rangers games. I've been involved in quite a few. I don't know if they still happen. I really don't, but they did used to happen. They used to be a waste of time because the police would go, I will take that on, and then do something completely different. Look, the police are always going to say that. The police are regarding this as a resounding victory because there was no repeat of the violence on Argyle Street. They will use these powers again. And so this is here to stay, and it's something that we've got to fight. Me and Colin are both involved in supporters clubs. We know that you didn't need to be an ultra to be targeted as a criminal on a supporters bus going to an away game.
Yep.
So these guys are now empowered, and it's up to the club to actually back us up.
Yeah, I mean, you can see that from the kind of press release, Colin. They do see it as a success, a resounding victory for the authorities. Kev says it's here to stay, but so are the ultras.
Yeah, I mean, actions speak louder than words. And as Kev says, he can get into the room and say, yeah, that's great, we'll do this for the next one, and yeah. And then the same thing happens again. Scottish football fans are treated not even as second-class citizens, but as third-class citizens, depending on where it's going. And you see it even, it reeks of, like, I'm trying to find the right words, because I don't want to go over the top here, but it does reek of classism from not only the police, but from the politicians in this country, the way that they treat Scottish football fans. And all it does is give the media the opportunity to come out and put football fans in the worst light possible. There's the Tartan Army away in Greece. What is the difference between them going to Greece and Celtic going to Motherwell? But you can guarantee that the way that they will be treated on Sunday going to the game as compared to the way that we would be is night. Or the Scottish rugby fans, when they go to Murrayfield, it's all encouraged. Have a bevy. Here, it's £10, buy a pint. Don't worry about any trouble. We'll not mention it. You go to horse racing and there's youngsters fighting amongst each other. The only difference is when it comes down. Darts, exactly. To the point where the darts, the people that run the PDC had to come out and make a statement about the way that it ran at the Hydro. But it just gets brushed under the carpet because Scottish football fans are in the majority. And when the majority is there to be targeted, it's an easy target. And the only way that it can change is not just getting involvement with the police, not just getting involvement with the clubs, with the fan groups, but it has to go up to a political level and it has to go to Parliament and there has to be change within Parliament. You saw what happened when they got rid of the Offensive Behaviour in Football Act. This incident happened down at the Gallagate where they were kettled before. Let's see what the changing movement is here, because it's ridiculous that if you put on a football jersey in Scotland, and I say only Scotland because we've been all over Europe, and you do not get treated the way that you get treated in Scotland if you've got a football jersey on, doesn't matter what team you support. It's ridiculous.
Colin, well said. I totally agree with that. Gentlemen, we have spoken about this quite a bit and we'll continue to speak about it because I'm sure there'll be developments in the coming weeks and months in relation to the police versus the football ultras, because it's not just Celtic, there's other ultras that are being treated in the same way. Thanks everybody for getting involved. 1200 live on this Friday afternoon. We enter a weekend of no Celtic, but we'll be covering an old Celtic game 25 years ago. Vida Riseth, Ayo Berkovic, all the big names. Come and join us at 2 o'clock where Liam Carrigan and I will be doing a live watch-along. So it's a 1.5 hour show. You will have to have access to Celtic TV. You might be able to find the game on YouTube. I'll have a look to see if there's any links. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Thank you to Colin Watt and Kevin Graham for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.